There's a cause behind every result you experience in life, whether it is recognized or not. Many people look only at what is visible. They measure progress by external changes, by results, opportunities, and circumstances. When these do not change as quickly as expected, they assume that something is wrong with their actions, their strategy, or even their ability. But the true cause is often not found in what you're doing. It is found in what you are accepting as true within yourself. There is a deeper level of mind that is always active. It does not evaluate or question. It simply receives impressions and brings them into expression. This part of your mind responds not to occasional thoughts, but to the ideas you consistently feel to be true. If, beneath your effort, there exists a quiet acceptance of delay, difficulty, or limitation, that impression becomes the pattern through which your experiences are shaped. You may act with discipline and intention, yet still carry an inner expectation that progress will be slow or that success requires struggle. This expectation, though subtle, influences how you perceive situations, how you respond to opportunities, and how you interpret outcomes. In this way, the results you experience are not random. They are the expression of a deeper agreement within your own mind. This cause is often invisible because it operates quietly. It is formed through repeated thoughts, reinforced through emotion, and accepted without conscious awareness. Over time, it becomes so familiar that it feels natural, even unquestioned. And yet it is this hidden pattern that determines whether your efforts are supported or resisted from within. To understand this is to begin seeing your life differently. You're no longer limited to judging results at the surface. You begin to recognize that behind every visible condition, there is an inner acceptance that has helped shape it. When this inner cause changes, the outer results must, in time, follow. There is a widespread belief that success is the direct result of effort, that the more one struggles, the greater the reward. Yet this assumption overlooks a deeper law governing the mind. Hard work in itself is not creative. It is the direction of thought behind the work that determines its result. A person may labor diligently, applying skill and persistence, and still encounter delay or disappointment. Another may act with less strain, yet find that progress unfolds more naturally. The difference does not lie in effort alone, but in the mental attitude from which that effort proceeds. The subconscious mind does not measure how hard you work. It responds to what you accept as true. If your actions are accompanied by a feeling that success is difficult, distant, or uncertain, that impression is impressed upon the deeper mind. It becomes the pattern through which your efforts are expressed. In this way, struggle may be unconsciously reproduced, no matter how sincere the attempt to move forward. Joseph Murphy emphasized that the subconscious acts upon belief, not willpower. You cannot force it through strain. When the conscious mind is tense and anxious, it often suggests lack rather than fulfillment. And the subconscious, being receptive, accepts this suggestion and brings forth corresponding conditions. This is why excessive effort can sometimes delay results. When the mind is filled with pressure, it interferes with clear perception and right action. Decisions become clouded by urgency. Opportunities may be overlooked or approached with doubt. The individual feels as though he must push life forward rather than allow it to unfold in accordance with a deeper intelligence. True success arises when effort is guided by inner conviction, when you inwardly accept that what you seek is possible, natural, and already in process. Your actions change in quality. They become more direct, more balanced, and more effective. There is less strain, yet greater precision. Work is still performed, but it is no longer driven by fear or tension. It is supported by a quiet certainty that the result is already taking shape. In this state, effort becomes an instrument, not the source of success. Within you is a level of mind that does not argue, compare, or resist. It receives impressions and acts upon them with unwavering fidelity. This deeper mind is influenced not by what you occasionally think, but by what you quietly accept as true. A belief need not be spoken aloud to be effective. It may exist as a subtle feeling, a repeated assumption, or an unexamined expectation. yet once it is accepted inwardly, it becomes a directive force. Joseph Murphy described the subconscious as a faithful servant. It takes the ideas impressed upon it and works to express them in form, experience, and condition. It does not distinguish between what is beneficial or limiting. It simply responds to the nature of the impression it has received. If you inwardly accept that progress is slow, that opportunities are scarce, or that success is reserved for others, these ideas are impressed upon the subconscious as instructions. Over time, they shape your reactions, influence your decisions, and determine what you recognize as possible. This process is quiet and often unnoticed. You may consciously desire advancement, yet carry within yourself a feeling of uncertainty or delay. The subconscious responds to the feeling rather than the words. It acts upon the belief that is emotionally accepted, not the goal that is merely stated. In this way, your inner acceptance becomes the mold through which experience is formed. What you believe, even without deliberate intention, tends to express itself, not through sudden change, but through a gradual alignment of thought, behavior, and circumstance. The events you encounter, the opportunities you perceive, and the direction your life takes are influenced by these accepted impressions. To understand this principle is to recognize that belief is not passive, it is creative, and what you quietly believe, you continually instruct your mind to bring into reality. There exists within many individuals a division so subtle that it often goes unnoticed. On one level, there is desire, the conscious intention to advance, to succeed, to move into a higher expression of life. This desire may be sincere, repeated, and even supported by deliberate action. Yet beneath it, there may remain an opposing expectation. One part of the mind looks forward with hope, while another quietly anticipates delay, difficulty, or disappointment. This inner contradiction weakens the creative process at its source. Joseph Murphy taught that the subconscious mind responds to the idea that is accepted with feeling. When two impressions are present, it is not the spoken desire that prevails, but the belief that carries conviction. If you desire success, yet inwardly expect struggle, the subconscious receives a mixed instruction. The result is not immediate failure, but a slowing of progress, a pattern of partial movement followed by hesitation or return. This conflict is not always expressed in clear thoughts. It may appear as a vague sense of doubt, a tendency to question favorable outcomes, or an inclination to prepare for unfavorable ones, even while pursuing advancement. In such a state, the mind is divided. Action is taken, but not with full agreement. Decisions are made, yet accompanied by uncertainty. Opportunities arise, but are approached with caution rather than confidence. The individual may then conclude that success is difficult without recognizing that the difficulty originates within the divided state of thought itself. Harmony of mind is essential. When desire and expectation are brought into agreement, when what you seek is also what you inwardly accept as natural, the subconscious is no longer receiving conflicting impressions. It is given a clear direction. In that clarity, thought becomes more decisive, feeling more stable, and action more effective. Progress is no longer interrupted by inner resistance. It unfolds in accordance with a unified conviction. There are beliefs within you that do not speak, yet they decide. They were formed quietly through experience, repetition, and acceptance, and over time they settle beneath conscious awareness. You no longer notice them, yet they remain active, shaping the direction of your life. These hidden beliefs do not stop you from acting. They determine how far your actions are allowed to go. You may begin something with energy and intention, yet find that momentum fades without clear reason. You may approach opportunity, yet hold back at the moment when full commitment is required. You may advance and then return to familiar ground. This is not a lack of discipline. It is the influence of an accepted inner limit. If at a deeper level, there exists an assumption that success is difficult to maintain, that progress leads to pressure, or that you're not meant to go beyond a certain point, that belief sets a boundary. And the mind, being consistent with what it accepts, will not move beyond that boundary for long.
It does not resist you openly. It guides you back quietly.
In this way, effort is not wasted. It is contained. You move, but within a range that feels safe and familiar. Anything beyond it creates subtle discomfort, hesitation, or self-doubt. And so, without fully realizing it, you adjust your actions to remain within that invisible limit. The result is a pattern. Progress that begins but does not fully unfold. The cause is not found in what you're doing. It is found in what you have allowed yourself to believe without question. When this hidden structure remains unchanged, effort alone cannot carry you beyond it. But when it is recognized and released, the same effort begins to move freely, no longer restricted by an unseen boundary. Thought alone is not enough to bring an idea into expression. There is a deeper element required, something that gives thought its substance and power. That element is feeling. An idea may pass through the mind many times without effect if it is not accepted emotionally. But when a thought is accompanied by a sense of reality, when it is felt as true, it impresses itself upon the deeper levels of mind and begins to take form. The mind does not respond to words spoken without conviction. It responds to the inner atmosphere in which those words are held. If you affirm success while feeling uncertain, the impression received is uncertainty. If you speak of progress while inwardly expecting delay, it is the expectation that is accepted. The emotional tone becomes the message. For this reason, acceptance is not an intellectual act. It is a state of feeling. To accept an idea is to enter into agreement with it inwardly, to allow it to feel natural, appropriate, and already in motion. It is not forced or strained. It is quiet, steady, and assured. When this state is present, the idea is no longer resisted. There's no inner argument, no tension between what is desired and what is believed. The mind becomes receptive, and in that receptivity, the impression sinks deeper. This is why moments of calm are so powerful. When the mind is relaxed, free from urgency and conflict, it is more open to suggestion. Ideas received in this state are not filtered through doubt or contradiction. They are accepted more fully and impressed more deeply. Feeling, therefore, is the bridge between thought and expression. It is what gives direction to the creative process within. Without it, thought remains at the surface. With it, thought becomes formative. When you begin to cultivate a feeling that corresponds with what you seek, when you allow yourself to experience it inwardly as present, rather than distant, you establish a new condition within the mind. This condition influences how you think, how you act, and how you respond to what appears before you. Gradually, it begins to shape the pattern through which your experiences unfold. There is no need for force in this process. Strain suggests that the result is not yet accepted. It creates tension, and tension divides the mind. But when the desired outcome is felt as natural and already taking shape, the mind settles into agreement. In that agreement, resistance diminishes, and what has been accepted inwardly begins, in time, to express itself outwardly. There's a tendency within the mind to return to what is familiar, even when something better has been clearly desired. You may resolve to think differently, to act with greater confidence, to move beyond previous limitations. And for a time you do. Your thoughts are more deliberate, your actions more aligned, and there is a sense of forward movement. Yet without warning, the old patterns begin to reappear. The same reactions return. The same doubts surface. The same habits quietly reestablish themselves. This does not occur because change is impossible. It occurs because what is familiar has been more deeply impressed. The mind accepts what has been repeated most often as natural. Over time, these repeated impressions form a kind of inner pathway, a pattern through which thought and behavior tend to flow automatically. Even when a new idea is introduced, it does not immediately replace the old pattern. It exists alongside it. And when attention relaxes, or when circumstances trigger familiar responses, the mind returns to the pathway it knows best. This return is not deliberate, it is mechanical. You're not choosing the old pattern in that moment. You're following an impression that has been accepted so often that it now operates without conscious direction. In this way, progress may seem inconsistent. There are periods of clarity and advancement, followed by moments that resemble the past. This creates the impression that change is temporary, when in truth, it is still in the process of becoming established. A pattern is not removed by a single decision. It is replaced through repetition of a new idea, accepted with consistency. Each time you return to the new way of thinking, each time you choose a different response, sustain a different assumption, or hold a different inner image, you're strengthening a new pathway. At first, this requires attention. The new pattern may feel unfamiliar, even unnatural. It may seem as though you're acting against habit, but with repetition, it begins to feel more stable, more accessible, and more true. Gradually, the balance shifts. What was once automatic loses its hold. What was once intentional becomes natural. The return to old patterns, therefore, is not failure. It is evidence of what has been most deeply practiced. When you understand this, you no longer interpret these moments as setbacks. You see them as part of a transition, an indication that a new pattern is being formed, but has not yet become dominant. With continued reinforcement, the new impression takes root, and in time the mind begins to move in a new direction, without effort, without strain, and without returning to what once defined it. Beneath every action you take, there's an idea of yourself that you are quietly living from. You may not speak of it directly. You may not even be fully aware of it. Yet it is present in the way you think, the way you respond, and the limits you accept without question. This inner identity is not formed in a single moment. It is built gradually through repeated impressions, past experiences, and the meanings you have assigned to them. Over time, it becomes familiar, and what is familiar begins to feel true. From this sense of self, your life is expressed. You do not consistently act outside of the identity you have accepted. You may attempt to do so for a time, but unless that inner concept changes, your actions will tend to return to what feels natural to you. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will interpret events through that lens. You will expect delay where progress is possible, question opportunity where it is present, and remain within boundaries that reflect that assumption. If you see yourself as capable, stable, and advancing, your responses begin to change. You approach situations differently. You recognize possibilities more quickly. You move with a different sense of direction. The outer difference is visible. The inner cause is identity. This identity is sustained by agreement. Each time you think in accordance with it, feel in accordance with it, and act in accordance with it, you reinforce it. It becomes more established, more convincing, and more difficult to question. And so, even when new opportunities arise, they are filtered through the identity already in place. You may hesitate, not because the opportunity is lacking, but because it does not yet align with how you see yourself. You may hold back, not because you're incapable, but because the action required does not feel consistent with your accepted role. In this way, life does not simply reflect what you want. It reflects what you are prepared to be, to change results. The inner concept must be elevated. This does not occur through force or imitation, but through a gradual acceptance of a new idea of self. You begin to think from a different position, to feel from a different level of certainty, and to allow new possibilities to seem natural rather than distant. At first, this shift may feel unfamiliar. The new identity does not yet carry the same weight as the old. It requires conscious reinforcement. It must be returned to health. and accepted repeatedly until it begins to settle into the deeper levels of mind. As this happens, your reactions change without effort. You no longer attempt to act differently. You act in accordance with who you now believe yourself to be. Decisions become clearer. Confidence becomes more stable. Progress becomes less interrupted. The outer results follow, not as something forced into existence, but as something that corresponds to the identity you have accepted. For you do not become what you wish. You express what you believe yourself to be. The image you hold of yourself is not fixed. It is formed, and what is formed can be reformed. Within the deeper levels of mind, there exists a picture, a mental representation of who you are. It is not always expressed in words. It is felt as a quiet knowing, a sense of what is natural for you to experience and what is not. This inner image has been built over time. It has been shaped by repeated thoughts, emotional reactions, and the meanings you have assigned to past events. What was once a passing impression has, through repetition, become accepted as identity. Yet this image is not permanent. It remains active only because it continues to be accepted. To change it, you do not struggle against it, you replace it. The mind does not respond effectively to denial. It responds to substitution. When a new image is introduced, clearly formed and consistently sustained, it begins to take root in the same way the previous one did. This process requires direction. You begin by forming a definite picture of the self you intend to express. Not as something distant, but as something present. You see yourself acting with assurance, moving with clarity, and responding in a way that reflects the change you seek. This is not imagination for its own sake. It is the deliberate creation of a pattern. When this image is held with calm attention and accompanied by a feeling of naturalness, it begins to impress itself upon the deeper mind. It does not require strain. In fact, strain interferes with the process. The most effective moments are those in which the mind is quiet. In such moments, the boundary between conscious thought and deeper acceptance becomes less defined. The image is received more directly, without resistance, and begins to establish itself as a new point of reference. Repetition gives it strength. Each time the image is returned to, it becomes more familiar. What was once imagined begins to feel possible. What felt possible begins to feel appropriate. And what feels appropriate is eventually accepted. As acceptance deepens, the change becomes less effortful. You do not remind yourself constantly of the new image. It begins to operate on its own. Your reactions shift without deliberate control. Your responses align with the new pattern without conscious adjustment. The old image fades, not because it is removed forcefully, but because it is no longer sustained. In its place, a new conception takes hold. From this new conception, your life begins to express itself differently, not suddenly, but steadily. Not through isolated effort, but through a consistent alignment between who you see yourself to be and how you move through the world. The outer change follows the inner picture. And as the inner image becomes clear and established, the results that once seemed distant begin to appear as a natural extension of it. There is a state in which the mind is no longer divided. Thought moves in one direction, feeling supports it. Action follows without hesitation. In such a state, there is no inner resistance. The individual is not attempting to persuade himself, nor is he struggling against opposing tendencies. There is a quiet agreement within, and from that agreement, effectiveness arises. Misalignment, on the other hand, creates subtle disorder. A person may think of success, yet feel uncertainty. He may act with intention, yet carry an undercurrent of doubt. Outwardly, there is movement. Inwardly, there is hesitation. This division weakens the expression of effort. When thought suggests one outcome and feeling suggests another, the deeper mind receives an unclear impression. Action then becomes inconsistent. At times it is decisive. at other times restrained. The result is irregular progress. Alignment begins with clarity of idea.
The mind must first settle upon what is to be accepted as true, not as a wish, but as a conclusion. When this idea is held steadily, without contradiction, it establishes direction.
Feeling then follows the idea. As the mind contemplates the accepted outcome, it begins to generate a corresponding sense of reality. This feeling is not forced. It arises naturally. When the idea is no longer questioned, it carries a sense of ease, of appropriateness, as though what is accepted is already in motion. From this union of thought and feeling, action takes on a different quality. There is less deliberation and more certainty. Decisions are made without excessive comparison. Timing becomes more precise. Movement becomes more continuous. Action is no longer driven by urgency or pressure. It is guided by inner order. In this condition, the mind is not scattered across conflicting directions. It is concentrated. And what is concentrated gains power. Even simple actions, when performed from this unified state, produce greater effect than repeated effort carried out from a divided mind. For the whole of the individual is directed toward a single outcome. This alignment does not occur by accident. It is established through disciplined attention. Each time the mind returns to a clear idea, sustains it without contradiction, and allows the corresponding feeling to develop, the alignment to strengthen. Over time, it becomes natural. Thought no longer wanders into opposing conclusions. Feeling no longer fluctuates with uncertainty. Action no longer hesitates between alternatives. There is continuity, and in that continuity, progress becomes steady. The outer world begins to reflect this order, not through force, but through the consistent expression of a mind that is no longer divided within itself. The subconscious is shaped through what is impressed upon it repeatedly. It does not require force, nor does it respond to occasional effort. It is influenced by continuity, by ideas that are returned to again and again until they become familiar, and through familiarity, accepted. An idea introduced once may be noticed, but it is not yet established. It remains at the surface, easily replaced by older patterns that have been reinforced over time. For this reason, repetition is not mere practice. It is the method by which a new pattern is formed. Each time an idea is revisited with attention and calm acceptance, it leaves a deeper impression. At first, the effect may seem slight. The previous patterns remain active, and the new idea may feel uncertain or incomplete. Yet, with continued repetition, something begins to change. The idea becomes easier to recall. It feels less foreign. It begins to carry a sense of familiarity. This familiarity is significant. What feels familiar is more readily accepted, and what is accepted by the deeper mind begins to influence behavior, perception, and response. Repetition, therefore, is the means by which a new direction is established without conflict. There is no need to struggle against previous impressions. The mind does not require removal, it requires replacement. When a new idea is introduced consistently, it gradually takes precedence. The older pattern loses strength, not through opposition, but through disuse. The most effective repetition is not mechanical. Words repeated without attention produce little effect. But when an idea is returned to with awareness, when it is contemplated, felt, and accepted, it carries weight. It becomes an impression rather than a sound. Moments of quiet are especially favorable. When the mind is relaxed and less occupied with external demands, it is more receptive. Ideas introduced in such moments are not immediately challenged. They are received more directly and settle more easily into the deeper levels of thought. Over time, repetition creates a new tendency. The mind begins to return to the new idea without effort. It becomes the natural response rather than the deliberate one. What once required attention now operates automatically. This is the point at which reprogramming has taken effect. the individual no longer attempts to think differently. He finds that his thoughts have changed. His reactions follow a new pattern. His decisions arise from a different foundation. The process is gradual, yet certain, for what is impressed repeatedly, with clarity and acceptance, must eventually be expressed. Repetition, when rightly understood, is not a matter of forcing the mind, but of gently directing it. The deeper levels of consciousness are impressed by persistence without strain. An idea that is returned to calmly, with steady attention, begins to take on a life of its own. It is no longer something you're trying to believe. It becomes something that feels increasingly true. This is how the inner pattern is formed. At first, the mind may wander. It may return to older impressions simply because they are more familiar. But each time you bring it back, without frustration, without tension, you are establishing a new direction. This quiet persistence is essential. The mind accepts what is repeated with ease far more readily than what is imposed with effort. When an idea is approached with urgency, it often produces resistance. But when it is revisited in the spirit of calm assurance, it is received without opposition. In this way, repetition becomes a process of planting. Each return to the idea is a seed placed into the deeper mind. You do not attempt to force its growth. You trust that, once impressed, it will develop according to its nature. There is a rhythm to this process. The idea is introduced, accepted in feeling, and then released. It is not held with tension throughout the day. It is not examined constantly for results. It is allowed to settle. Over time, these repeated impressions accumulate. They begin to outweigh previous patterns, not by conflict, but by continuity. The new idea gains strength simply because it has been given consistent attention. And as it gains strength, it begins to influence thought without effort. You find yourself thinking in accordance with it. You respond differently, not by deliberate correction, but because the inner tendency has shifted. This is the effect of true repetition. When an idea has been accepted inwardly, there is no need to pursue its outer expression with anxiety. The mind that has impressed a clear pattern upon itself does not remain in doubt. It does not watch constantly for evidence, nor does it question whether the process is working. It rests in a quiet certainty that what has been accepted will take form. This state is not passivity. It is a form of confidence that allows action to proceed without strain. When you attempt to force results, you introduce tension into the mind. This tension suggests that the outcome is uncertain, and in doing so, it disturbs the very condition required for its expression. Effort driven by urgency often disrupts timing. It leads to premature decisions, unnecessary adjustments, and a continual shifting of direction. The individual becomes preoccupied with results, and in that preoccupation loses the steadiness that would allow those results to unfold. There is a different way of proceeding. When the inner work has been done, when the idea has been accepted with clarity and reinforced through calm repetition, action becomes simpler. You do what is required, but without the sense that everything depends on immediate results. There is space in the mind. This space allows perception to remain clear. It allows opportunities to be recognized without pressure. It allows decisions to arise naturally, without being forced. In such a state, results appear in their proper time. They are not drawn in by tension, but expressed through alignment. What has been established inwardly begins to find its way into form through a series of natural developments, through events, through ideas, through interactions that seem to arise without effort. This unfolding is often quiet. It does not announce itself dramatically. It reveals itself through continuity, through progress that feels steady rather than sudden. To allow results is to trust the process that has already been set in motion. You do not abandon action. You abandon strain. You continue forward guided by the inner certainty that what has been accepted is already moving toward expression. And in that certainty, the mind remains composed, receptive, and free from the interference that would otherwise delay the very outcome it seeks.